take a look at today's papers, and we're joined now by Dr. Liam Lenten, sports economist from La Trobe University. Liam, good morning.
Good morning, Virginia. Good morning, Michael.
What's top of your list today?
The climate deal in Durban again.
Yes. So this is the front page of The Australian we'll take a look at first. Take us through what we understand is going to happen here.
Well, some of the major emitters, they've agreed to make an agreement with the timeline now in process, looking to nut down the major details by about 2015. Now, making the agreement to make the agreement and drawing out the timeline is the easy part. But of course, when it comes down to the devil in the detail for the participants, we know that that's more problematic. So I'm taking a very sceptical view of this story. I think that we shouldn't be surprised that when later on we hear reports about the impending roadblocks to this process.
What sort of roadblocks are you anticipating?
Okay, and it doesn't have to be climate deals, but anything to do with, let's say, the current financial crisis in Europe. It just seems that every time you get a bunch of potential signatories to an agreement in a single room, they just... getting together at the initial stages is the easy part, and then when they get down to, all right, now what do we have to do to make this agreement work, it just becomes a lot more difficult for them to prevent themselves from becoming fractured on major issues. And I foresee that this is probably what's going to happen between China and India and the US in the next few years.
Let's move on, and there's nothing that gets the blood running in political junkies more than a cabinet reshuffle. It looks as like we got one on this morning.
We certainly have, Michael, and a lot of the evidence shows that reshuffles are more likely to happen when the government's not doing so well in the polls. And given that this has been a calendar year where Labor has been struggling for a large portion of it in the polls, I'm surprised that this hasn't happened a little bit earlier. Almost caught the major media outlets napping on this one. The focus in the various media outlets, we've got a screenshot from The Age here, and they've gone very much with the poll-driven aspect of it. The Oz has gone the more general angle. The Fin Review has focused more on the Bill Shorten angle. I know you mentioned this just before, Michael. He stands to do very well out of this reshuffle, being promoted to the Industrial Relations portfolio. So they've all gone for very different angles on this one.
And we don't really know until the Prime Minister holds her media conference the shape of the Cabinet. There's still a lot of speculation about who may be dumped, if not from the Cabinet to the Outer Ministry, if not altogether out of the front bench.
Yeah, well, although this is a very natural process that goes on once we know the reshuffle is impending. There doesn't seem to be anything in the media reports about this one that's unusual in this case.
A certain Foreign Minister looks as though he's going to stay exactly where he is too.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. Maybe there'd be a lot more scrutiny had the reshuffle had him going somewhere else, but it's probably the least aversionary tactic.
I think so.
All right, let's look at the Financial Review, and they're taking a closer look at the real political crisis in Russia at the moment that the President faces. Yeah,
certainly, Virginia, but it's not so much that they're looking at it, it's that you have to go so far into the Fin Review to find anything on this story. Page 11, indeed.
You think it should be earlier on?
Yeah, certainly. I think the coverage has been undercooked somewhat. I think this story needed somewhat of a more prominent run. The Age has gone on it on page 6 and the Oz on page 10. And they've just... there hasn't been much more happen in the last 24 hours that has warranted a lot more reporting on various angles. But
there have been a number of very, very big protests and more people hitting the streets.
Yeah, certainly. But this was coming out around about 24 hours ago anyway. But they seem to, in the longer term, ignore the political economy of the price of oil. Putin, and if you consider him and Medvedev a political double act, that they've been lucky insofar that the price of oil has risen steadily throughout most of their collective 11-year, 12-year reign. Just in the last few years, the price of oil has dropped off. It's on the rise again, but still hasn't recovered to its pre-crisis highs. And how it seems that if anything's really going to make the blood boil of the citizens and cause political unrest, that it's going to be more economic issues rather than social issues.
Right, okay. Well, look, Harold Hopkins his life is being celebrated in The Age today. We'll have a look at page 5, and of course other places as well. I know I should know him, and I know that the face looks vaguely familiar, but I don't. Can you fill me in, Liam?
Well, maybe the face doesn't look so familiar because it's been so long since he was in any really prominent movies. But if you
Don's Party,
Gallipoli, and one of my
Yes.
personal favourites, The Club.
yes.
All right, so he played. I see.
Cooley in Don's Party.
There you go.
But he'd still been quite active, and in fact he'd auditioned apparently for a role in The Great Gatsby, which is now being filmed in Sydney.
That's right.
And so, that's a shame.
Yeah.
And it turns out that some of the factors related to his death come about from asbestos exposure from when he was an apprentice carpenter before he became big in acting. But my thing about when we see celebrities pass away, that if you remember them quite well, it's just a nice little timely reminder of how old we really are.
Yeah, well, that's true. So maybe I can take some joy from the fact that I don't remember him that well. Or maybe it's just the memory is going, one or the other.
Stop talking now.
Yeah. And your final story is in the Mercury?
Certainly, but it's not so much the story itself. It's been a very fractured news day in the papers, it seems. All the state-based papers are going with state-related stories, and because the test is in Hobart, the Mercury have focused on Ponting, of course, being the hometown boy.
Yes.
But I think the behavioural aspects are more important here. With both the openers, Hughes and Warner, doing very well at the moment. They're both under pressure, but often it seems when athletes are under pressure, and cricket's very idiosyncratic for batters, that if it turns out that one of them really goes on with it today, and often they do really well after being under pressure but having that one big innings, that maybe with respect to Philip Hughes will one day look back on this as being the real turning point of his career, especially in light of the stuff up that New Zealand made in not challenging the decision made on the court behind early on yesterday.
Yeah, and there's also been lots of, must be hard for the batsmen who I'm sure don't read the papers through choice, lots of speculation about their futures all weekend, especially concerning Philip Hughes.
Yeah, so and there's actually some view that Michael Clarke may be the only single individual in that entire batting lineup who's 100% assured of making Boxing Day, yes.
Liam, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks once again.
Thank you.
And speaking of the cricket, we're joined again by Paul Kennedy. Paul, Australia has victory in its sights this morning.
It does, and we can show you that incident that Liam was referring to as well with Hughes and Warner as they start creeping along and then played some nice shots. But yes, they did.